Hey, welcome. So, when you think about social work, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably a therapist helping a family, right? Or maybe a caseworker getting someone the resources they need. It all feels very personal, very one on one. But what if I told you that social work is actually one of the most political jobs out there? Yeah, really. Let's get into why that is. To get us started, just think about this question for a second. Is a private family counseling session something that seems totally separate from politics or protests? Is that a political event? I mean, your gut reaction is probably no way, right? It's about personal feelings and relationships, not public policy.
Well, here's the twist. From the perspective of the social work profession itself, the answer is a huge, definitive yes. That counseling session, and pretty much every other thing a social worker does, is considered a political act. So, how can that be? Let's break it down.
Now, this isn't some new radical idea. This political side of social work is actually baked right into its DNA. From the very beginning, the profession has had a mandate not just to help people cope, but to actually create change. This all comes from three really core ideas. First off, the whole profession exists to serve marginalized groups, and you can't do that without advocating for their rights. Second, it's designed to challenge the power imbalances in society that create inequality in the first place. And third, social work is all about promoting humanistic values, things like dignity and respect, which often means pushing back against systems that only care about money or power. And this has been the deal since day one. If you look back to the early 20th century, pioneers like Jane Addams and Bertha Reynolds were social activists first, period. They saw absolutely no difference between giving someone direct help and fighting for massive social reform. Today's social workers are just carrying on that same legacy. Okay, so what does being political actually look like for a social worker on a Tuesday afternoon? It's not always what you'd think, like marching with a picket sign. The profession really sees this happening on two different but totally connected levels. So you can look at it in two ways. On the one hand, you have what we all think of as political, the big stuff, protesting unfair laws, lobbying politicians, that kind of thing. But then there's a much broader view. In this view, political means any action that helps to correct a power imbalance, even on a tiny scale, like in that family counseling session we talked about at the beginning. You've probably heard this famous quote, and it absolutely nails it. When a social worker helps a single parent navigate a bureaucratic system that's set up for them to fail, that's political. When they help a family renegotiate who has the power and the voice, that's political. Because those personal struggles don't happen in a vacuum. They are almost always symptoms of a much larger political reality. Right, so even within this big political framework, social workers don't all take the same route. There are basically two main models they follow to try and achieve social justice. On one side, you have what's called the ecological model. You can think of this as working within the system. These are the social workers who do the research, gather the data, and present it to policymakers to try and make change from the inside. Then, on the other side, you've got the structural model. This approach is all about challenging the system from the outside by organizing clients, speaking out as social critics, and pushing for deep, fundamental change. But here is the most important part. These are not enemies. They're not opposing teams. Whether they're working from the inside or pushing from the outside, both models are shooting for the exact same goal, a more just and fair society. They're really just two sides of the very same coin. So when you start putting all these pieces together, you've got the historical mission, the two different levels of action, and these two models for making change, you start to get a whole new picture of what a social worker really is. They are, for all intents and purposes, a political actor. A professional who uses their skills and their own moral compass to take political action. And that action could be as huge as organizing a nationwide campaign, or it could be as small and just as important as helping one person find their voice. So really, the big takeaway here is this. We've got to see the bigger picture. Social work isn't just about patching people up so they can deal with a broken system. It's fundamentally about fixing that system. It is a powerful engine for social change. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. If the very profession we created to help the most vulnerable people is, by its very nature, political, what does that tell us about justice itself? And what does it mean for the role that maybe all of us have to play in building a better society?